You're listening to Food Tech Talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technology in the food and supplement industries, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams. Let's jump right in. Hello and welcome to Food Tech Talk. I'm your host, Lydia Adams, and today we're joined by Eden Butvinik, a respected food scientist and photographer whose expertise span from developing delicious powder blends and beverages to capturing the essence of food through their lens. Eden combines their scientific knowledge and artistic flair to revolutionize food marketing and product development. Join us as they share insights from their journey, the challenges of bringing new products to market, and the future of food technology. Welcome, Eden.
Thank you so much, Lydia.
So we're going to start this off with a pun. It sounds like you have a lot of fingers and a lot of pies right now.
I sure do.
As well as being a food scientist, obviously a full-time job itself. You're also an actor, photographer, with a focus on food, right? So you certainly have a creative side and a scientific side. So to kick us off, I'd love to get more insight on the scientific side, kind of like what has led you to your role as a food scientist. And we'll talk a lot more about the creative stuff in a bit.
Awesome. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I really do a lot of different things, I would say, on my daily life. And that's why I love being a food scientist and working independently, because I'm able to do everything that I like to do, throughout my week. I would say getting into food science, it really started in choosing my major for college. I ended up going to college for food science, which is kind of a very specific major that most people don't know exists. But really, I found it during high school when I was looking up what is chemistry related that I could pursue that's kind of creative and kind of interesting, maybe more so than chemical laboratory. So I kind of landed on food science, and I'm kind of happy I did because it really does encompass the creative aspect of chemistry in a very focused way.
Taking that science, but also putting it into something that you love that's interesting. So cool. So, in your role, I'm sure there's a lot of balance between, innovation and what you're doing and compliance. And a lot of our listeners are kind of walking that line as well. So, given your extensive experience with natural foods and beverages, et cetera, can you share how you've navigated that balance between innovation and compliance? And, how do you ensure that new products are both groundbreaking and following all the regulations as they're, continuously changing?
Sure thing. I think really the main thing is finding ingredients that are already FDA approved. Really, that is the challenge for a lot of my customers who are coming in with a new innovative product. There may be certain ingredients that are not FDA approved, and that is a hurdle that we have to cross together, whether it be them trying to obtain some sort of approval or to find a source that exists already, even though it might be challenging. Essentially, it's basically a game of whether or not we can make something with products that are already generally regarded as safe, or go back to the drawing board and figure out if it's even possible.
Tell me about in your role as a consultant, how do you typically start those relationships with your clients and what are you usually working on?
A lot of the time, my clients I'm lucky in a way, they find me. So if they're looking for an independent food scientist, I'll come across their screen, whether it's on LinkedIn or otherwise. And they reach out and we'll see if it's something that I have experience in working on. So if they come to me with a project that I think I am equipped for, then I will accept and we'll continue the conversation. If it's something that I really don't have a lot of experience in, then I have to let them go. If you love something, let it go. Allow them to find someone who's a better fit. But essentially, they find me, we have a conversation and see what the first step of the process might look like, whether it's finding ingredients or kind of working on their existing product and getting it to where it needs to be.
And so when you say ingredients, I kind of think about trends in ingredients and flavors. In your work, what trends are you seeing in food right now in terms of flavors and what consumers want? Maybe something that they were not as interested in 10 years ago or so. What kind of things are you seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of products that have efficacy. So whether it's caffeine or to relax the person or to provide them some sort of feeling rather than just a taste. So that's something that I really hadn't seen for a while, aside from, let's say, alcohol or regular coffee. I'm seeing a lot of products that are caffeinated that are non-coffee. So that's kind of something new, and I feel that it's kind of booming in the industry. And in terms of flavor, I would say I'm seeing a lot of innovative flavors, combinations that we don't typically see out there, and bringing flavors that exist in other foods into foods that don't normally have them.
And so, combining all these flavors, it leads me to think through kind of like labeling, right? Labeling and transparency of ingredients are in the food. So I feel like the demand for accuracy is, in the food supply chain is growing. Has this shift influenced the formulation process that you've seen for things like natural foods or supplements?
I definitely see a lot of labeling being a hindrance to some of my customers who maybe don't have experience in the food world. They want to come at a product with saying, this will allow you to get better sleep, for example. And I have to kind of let them know that you can't just claim that everything is going to help a consumer in the way that you think it will, because there are so many rules about that. So sometimes I have to be, the bad cop and tell them what they don't want to hear, but it's the reality of the situation.
Have you ever had a situation where you had to kind of adapt a formulation to meet these types of expectations, or where you ended up changing something from that?
I definitely think there's always tweaking involved. If there's a claim that needs to be made and it just simply is not allowed to be made, then sometimes we will maybe remove certain ingredients that really don't need to be there if they're not going to be working for the customer or for the product. So it changes the way a product's efficacy might go, whether it's made into a stronger product or a weaker product.
And then in terms of like going to market, I've referenced this earlier, but having the photography aspect and kind of your background is really unique. So, how do you think that has influenced your ability to work with your clients and bring products to market faster and really like help the consumer to understand why they should buy it?
That's an interesting question. And I think something that I provide that might be unique is that I kind of give an overall idea of from idea to market. So I allow my customers, who are usually business owners, to kind of envision the product at market stage. So I say, when we add this ingredient, who is it for and why are we adding it? Is this simply to be listed on the label for your customers to see and like that it's on there? Or is it there to provide flavor? Is it there to provide some sort of efficacy? So when I envision a product, it is in a visual sense. I envision it in my head sort of as a photograph, the overall product. What is it? Why is it? And why will your customers want to purchase it? So that's something that we can definitely brainstorm along the process.
I think that's really important. Just thinking through a lot of folks in the industry, obviously they want the accuracy, the compliance, but they have to sell this eventually, right? So
Right.
it's a total, product life cycle they're thinking through. So that is probably an enormous advantage to have that in mind at the beginning. Switching gears a little bit, I'm curious of your take on sustainability. I think it's becoming really increasingly important in the industry. So, could you discuss the challenges and opportunities that you've encountered with, let's say, sourcing sustainable ingredients when developing products like the powders, the beverages, et cetera?
I would say there's always a sort of question of what is the source of an ingredient? Is it from a certain country? Is it grown in the USA? Or is it imported? That's a question really for the customer on how much they're willing to spend for certain ingredients. There are ingredients that are possibly lower quality, but they have to be imported from a foreign place. Or we have domestic ingredients that are grown in the USA, but they may come at a premium cost. So that's definitely a question for customers if they are willing to put in the extra effort and money in order to shop sustainably for ingredients, or if it's just out of the realm of possibility.
I think it's something we're just going to continue to see move in that direction. And a lot of the stuff that we do in this industry, when you look at it, it's almost consumer led, and as the consumer wants to see more sustainable ingredients and to know that they're making these I guess, positive choices for themselves, like that's what they want to see on the product.
For sure. And there's definitely certain ingredients that have an effort made in order to ensure that there's no slave labor, for example, cocoa and coffee, because those are understandably under scrutiny in that way. So a lot of the time, I'm looking for ingredients specifically that are fair trade, for example. But every single ingredient cannot be under that um, scrutiny. So it really just depends on the ingredients that we're looking for in that instance.
This kind of leads me to my next topic of technology, because at some point, as you're looking at ingredients and you're sourcing all these things, you have to kind of have some technology behind you, right, to be able to find these. So, as technology is transforming every industry, including food science. So, in your experience, what technological advancements have been the most significant impact specific to product development and safety?
I would say really having documentation be digital is a huge, huge hurdle that was kind of helping in the way that you can, achieve compliance. Having everything distributed digitally, having paperwork digitized is really fantastic in order to do note taking and making sure that everything is up to code. That, as well as basically having your formulations be digitized where there's no loss. So if you have a notebook with all of your notes in it and there's a flood and the notebook gets lost, everything kind of goes out the window. So having everything on a digitized basis is really helpful in that way. As far as sourcing and trying to find ingredients, for example, basically having every source be through the internet or having, communication with people outside of this country be so available to us is such a huge help, and it makes the process go along so much faster.
I completely agree with that. Is there anything that you're seeing now that is a technology that you think will really revolutionize the industry or the process that you go through on a regular basis?
There's definitely the thought about having recipes built by AI, which is not something that I'm a fan of just because that's the work that I do. And it's possible that business owners may begin getting their recipes on an AI sort of basis. And I've seen it done in some specialty food shows where they have a product that was completely designed by AI. I was like, okay, that's a little bit interesting. Because an AI model without the proper education may not really allow for proper food handling and compliance. For example, if you need to reach a certain pH in order to ensure food safety, the AI model doesn't know that we need this much of X ingredient in order to achieve the proper pH. So those are really the questions of whether or not AI is going to take a hand in formulating food products in the future.
That is a really interesting point that you make. I think we always say it's like AI is only as good as the humans that are running it, right? So
Right,
it's
right.
not something that you can just absolutely rely on solely to give you that information. But it is, it is a big trend, and it's kind of the future in nearly every industry.
I
So
guess
yeah,
so.
interesting that you brought that up. And as you were talking to, you're, speaking about something like that, with the AI not being able to really dig into the compliance itself. So, going back to your background, what are some of the most common challenges that companies are facing now in maintaining food safety and regulatory compliance, and kind of specifically in this, natural product realm?
I think it's definitely a challenge to maintain, for example, an organic specification or a non GMO specification because you're relying on your suppliers to maintain that level of certification. So, if you are using five different ingredients that are all already certified organic and you want to maintain your organic certification, and your supplier changes, you're going to have a big problem. So if there's like deforestation or, some sort of habitat loss and you lose your source for an ingredient, you're going to have to reformulate. So I would say environmentally, there's always a challenge because we have to remember that all these ingredients that we obtain, whether they be from a plant or an animal, are coming from nature. We sometimes forget when you're working in a lab and something is just sitting in a jar on the shelf that actually came from the ground most likely. So it's something we have to think about. Will this ingredient be around forever and will it always be the same?
And then going back a little bit to kind of the product development, I think that it can definitely be a balancing act between, innovation, cost, time to market. Was there ever a time that you can think of where you really had to make a tough decision to kind of like balance these factors out? And how did you address that?
Well, there's always the question of, is this possible? And if it is possible, what is it gonna take? So, I think there's, um, always a time in the process, and it kinda happens with every process. Am I able to make what the customer wants, within their guidelines? So if they say, "We want, each serving," for example, to cost 7 cents, and we know based on cost of pricing for ingredients and processing, it's not going to go down to 7 cents. Sometimes I have to sit down with the customer and tell them that it's really not possible at this time, or we have to make some major fundamental changes in order to achieve sort of what you want. So you have to go back and figure out what are the priorities for the product. And if the customer really wants to move forward, because at the end of the day, this is their company and their product, and I don't own it. I'm just there to help them to make it possible.
So you basically have to kind of balance that and also balance like the consumer need, your client's need, their company, and then the product itself. It sounds like it's kind of a lot to juggle. Just thinking towards the future, we've talked a little bit about trends. What other emerging trends that we haven't discussed do you think are really going to shape the food industry? I mean, anything across the topics of, product development, safety, compliance, and how can we prepare to, meet these trends?
Yeah, I think certain trends that I'm going to be expecting to see are probably trying to inhibit the sort of unhealthy ingredients or ingredients that are perceived as unhealthy. For example, going sugar free. There are so many ingredients that I see that replace sugar, and when I talk to a customer now, I usually assume that whatever they're trying to make is going to be sugar free because almost all my projects are sugar free. That's always something we have to work on. So I would say something like that is going to be what we're seeing. For example, removing fat, removing sugar, removing flavors, removing artificial ingredients, colors, etc. And really, compliance wise, it's going to be making sure that these products that we've known for so many years are going to be replaced by something that can stand up and last on the shelf just as long or behave the same way. Because sometimes taking away these fundamental factors of a food product will change it fundamentally. And customers think, oh, just take the sugar out. It's that easy. When really, replacing an ingredient is sometimes so complicated. So, ensuring that food products can really last through these trends in the food system, it's going to be tough, and we'll see if it can be maintained.
No, that's a really good point. And this is just a burning question I have. The photography. So we kind of talked about, like how you got into food science and why. How did you start doing photography?
Well, I've always been an artist and I always loved creating visually, performance-wise, etc. And really food science is kind of a part of that. I wanted to find something that was creative, and formulation is creative and it is artistic. So that's why it melds well with my other passions and it kind of works its way into my life in a creative and artistic way. Um, in terms of doing photography, I started when I was, let's say, in high school. I always did art through painting, drawing, and then photography was a way to capture real moments rather than using paint to interpret them. So, I've done photography since then, and I still continue to do so. And I focus mainly on artistic and conceptual self portraiture and portraiture.
Wow, that's awesome. A lot of people think science and creative, are two opposite sides. But the way when you're talking about it, it's like it's actually goes together. It's the same
Absolutely.
thing, especially with formulation being creative, as you said. So that's really cool. All right, so the next couple of questions are just kind of fun. So, who in the world of food safety, food industry, formulation, whatever, would you like to take out to lunch?
Someone that I would love to take to lunch is Justinus Kerner, who was someone from 100 years ago who discovered Clostridium botulinum toxin for the first time, I believe. And really, they found that Clostridium botulinum was causing these host of symptoms in these patients. And he basically was able to pinpoint what it was and start the use of that neurotoxin to do other tasks, for example, which basically has snowballed now into the use of Botox. A lot of people don't realize that Botox is really just the neurotoxin from Clostridium botulinum. But that is just like so cool because especially when we were in college and you're learning about all the pathogens, that was always one of the most interesting ones to me and my classmates because of its neurotoxin. It's so scary. It's the most potent neurotoxin in the world. So for someone to discover that so long ago, something that, I don't have the capacity to explore myself, I would love to hear more about that. So I'll take him to lunch.
I love that. That is very interesting. All right. I guess I have one more question for you, and then I'll leave it open for you to add anything else. So, if you could leave just like one final sort of piece of advice or final thoughts for somebody kind of like in your position within the food industry, what would you say?
I would say it's really important not to forget why you're here and what it is that you like to do. So, when I was going through college and then started working, I knew that I wanted to do the hands on formulation and product development. That's what interested me. That's what I was good at. And that's what really keeps me in the industry. So, I would say if you're able to find your way into a position that really fulfills your artistic needs, for example, or your emotional needs and creative needs, then it will allow you to thrive and do your best work.
That's a great piece of advice. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
I would say, as a business owner and someone who works for myself, it's definitely challenging and it's kind of a learning process in its own to see if you're able to work on your own. Working in a company, you usually have more stability and it's a little bit easier to make sure that you're continued to work. But when you work on your own, you don't have that stability. So I would say a word of caution for people who maybe want to start working on their own. You don't have stability in this work process. So just make sure that you're able to support yourself in some way. And best of luck.
Well, thank you so much, Eden. This has been an awesome interview. We really appreciate you sharing all of your expertise with us. And thanks to our audience. Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of food tech talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. To learn more about Trustwell and its technology platform that connects product formulation, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit www.trustwell.com. Thanks for listening.